I am not in the largest family photo, hanging in the middle of the living room. In that photo, my mother stands next to my younger sister Julia, both wearing identical pastel blue dresses. My father stands behind them, his hand resting proudly on Julia's shoulder. The picture was taken on the day my sister won second place in a school dance competition, an event my parents considered a great family triumph. I remember that day well. I had won an award of my own, first place in the statewide science research competition, but no one took a photo to capture that moment. No one remembered it. Julia has always been the pride of the family. Since childhood, I've known I was different from the rest of my family. While Julia loved princess dresses and tea parties with her friends, I spent hours in the garage assembling electronic models and reading books about quantum physics. My passion didn't lie in loud gatherings or shopping mall trips, but in formulas, experiments, and unanswered questions. I once thought that if I tried hard enough my parents would see me. But I was wrong. Anna, can you help Julia prepare her presentation? She needs to get a high grade this time. My parents never asked what I was working on or what I had accomplished. The only thing that mattered to them was how I could help Julia. From homework to science projects, everything I did well became the backdrop for my sister to shine. Once, I refused to help Julia cheat on a test, and the result was a week of tense silence that suffocated the house. My parents didn't yell or scold me, but the way they treated me, like I was invisible, hurt more than any words ever could. If it weren't for my grandparents, I'm not sure I would have had any confidence in myself at all. My grandfather Martin was the only one in the family who truly understood me. He had been a physicist before he retired, and perhaps it was he who passed on to me a love for science. Since I was little, he let me tinker with small experiment kits, taught me how to take apart clocks, and showed me how to create simple chemical reactions. "The world belongs to the curious, Anna," he used to say whenever I told him about my wild ideas. "Don't ever let anyone make you believe that curiosity is a bad thing." Weekend visits to my grandparents' house were the only times I felt like myself. We read science magazines together, discussed the latest research findings. No one there told me I was weird, and no one forced me to stop and do things a proper girl should do. But at home? At home, I was nothing more than a useless decoration. The day I received my acceptance letter for a summer research program at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, I ran home, my heart pounding with excitement. I thought, this time, my parents would finally be proud of me. But as soon as I opened my mouth, my mother simply sighed, folding clothes into the drawer, as she spoke in an indifferent tone. "Oh? Julia just got selected as the team captain for the school dance squad. I'm thinking of getting her a beautiful custom performance outfit." I stood frozen, feeling as if my joy had been squeezed out of my chest. They didn't even pretend to care. They didn't even bother to ask what my research program was about. My parents didn't hate me. They just didn't think I mattered. They never deliberately tried to hurt me, but their indifference cut deeper than any criticism ever could. If not for my grandparents, I might have believed I truly had no worth. But Grandpa Martin and Grandma Ellen never let me think that way. "You have a rare intellect, Anna," my grandmother told me one late afternoon, as I scribbled notes into my journal. "Just because they don't see it doesn't mean it isn't there." Her words were like a soft breeze in the storm inside me. I didn't need my parents to recognize my worth. I would prove it on my own. I just never expected that doing so would come at such a heavy price. I didn't realize what was happening right away. It started slowly, subtly, like a snake slithering through tall grass, making no sound. By the time I left home for college, I had grown used to my parents' indifference. I didn't expect warm hugs or heartfelt well wishes. I only hoped that at the very least, they wouldn't stop me from maintaining my bond with my grandparents, the only two people who truly believed in me. But I had underestimated their selfishness. At first, I called my grandparents regularly. Each call lasted for hours as I told them about my organic chemistry class, the experiments I was working on, and the new friends I had made in the research club. Grandpa Martin always listened eagerly, occasionally chiming in with experienced suggestions. Grandma Ellen would laugh and tell me how proud she was. But then, one day I called them as usual, and no one picked up. At first, I thought maybe they were busy or out, but the next day, and the day after that, then a whole week passed, and the phone just kept ringing, unanswered. I sent texts, no response. I left voicemails, no one replied. Worry started creeping into my mind. I called my mother and asked if something had happened. "Oh, they're probably just busy," she replied indifferently. "They're old, sometimes they forget to charge their phone." That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I had no reason to suspect anything. Until a month passed with still no news. My gut told me something was wrong. I decided to go home for the weekend without telling anyone. When I arrived, I drove straight to my grandparents' house. My heart pounded as I rang the doorbell. I waited, but no one answered. The windows were shut tight, curtains drawn. The whole house was eerily silent. I knocked, but still, no response. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw Julia standing there, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with defiance. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, nothing like the innocent tone she always used around our parents. "What are you doing here?" I shot back. "Where are Grandpa and Grandma? Why haven't they been answering my calls?" Julia rolled her eyes, clearly uninterested in answering. "They're not here anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What?" I stammered. "Where did they go?" She shrugged, her tone as indifferent as if she were discussing the weather. "Mom and Dad put them in a nursing home." I stood frozen, my mind blank. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" My fists clenched, my whole body trembling with anger. "Because you weren't here," Julia said flatly. "And honestly, no one wanted to tell you, Anna." I lost control. I don't remember how I ran back to my car, or how recklessly I drove to my parents' house. When I stormed inside, my mother was sitting at the dining table, calmly sipping tea as if nothing had happened. "What did you do?" I shouted, my fury ready to explode in my chest. "How could you send Grandpa and Grandma to a nursing home without telling me?" She didn't even flinch at my anger. She simply set her teacup down and looked at me with detached indifference. "Because they're old and need special care, Anna. Did you think they could take care of themselves forever? Do they have any health issues?" I demanded, my voice sharp. My mother looked me straight in the eye without blinking. "No." "Then why?" I pressed. My father walked into the room, arms crossed. "Because you disappointed them, Anna." It felt like the ground beneath me had just collapsed. "They tried calling you many times but you never answered," he continued. "You changed your phone number without telling them, you ignored them, and now you have the nerve to come back here and question us?" I couldn't breathe. "I never changed my number. I called them all the time but no one ever picked up." My mother shrugged, a fake look of pity in her eyes. "Maybe you just misremembered. Either way, it's too late now, they don't want to see you anymore." Those words cut into me like a sharp blade. I don't remember how I left the house. I only remember sitting in my car, my hands trembling as they gripped the steering wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. They had taken away the only people in my life who truly cared about me. And I swore I would find out the truth. I couldn't sleep. All night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with chaotic thoughts. My parents had lied. Julia had lied. They had cut off my communication with my grandparents. And worse, they had made them believe I was the one who had turned my back on them. I tried calling my grandparents' number dozens of times again, but all I got was the cold, empty ringing. No answer, no messages back. A deep sense of fear rose in my chest. What if they weren't at a nursing home? What if they were somewhere else, alone, abandoned, with no one to help them? 2 days later, I received a call I was never prepared to answer. My mother. Her voice was empty, devoid of emotion, but the words she spoke sliced through me like a frozen blade. "Your grandfather passed away." The world around me suddenly stopped spinning. What? My voice barely made it out. He passed away this morning. The funeral will be at 2 p.m. on Friday. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and every heartbeat pounded in my ears like a relentless drum. Why are you only telling me now? I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremble was impossible to hide. My mother sighed, as if speaking to a stubborn child. We didn't think you'd care. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to shatter the web of lies, but all I could do was clutch the phone tightly and make a silent promise to myself. I will be there. I won't let them take away my last chance to say goodbye. On Friday, I arrived at the church early. The clock in my car read 1:30 p.m. when I pulled up in front of St. Peter's Church. I stepped out, my heart heavy, but still clinging to a fragile hope. At the very least, I would get to see my grandfather one last time, to say goodbye before they could steal that from me too. But when I stepped inside the church, the first thing I noticed was, it was empty. The polished wooden pews sat in silence. There were no mourners, no hushed whispers of condolence, no familiar scent of incense that lingered in the air during funeral services. I turned around and spotted an elderly man tidying up near the door. "Excuse me, is this where Martin Walker's funeral is being held?" I asked. The man looked at me, confused. "The funeral? Oh, you mean the service this morning? That ended a long time ago, around 10 o'clock. It felt like I had been thrown into a void. "No, that can't be right. My family told me it was at 2 p.m. The man gave me a sympathetic look. "Miss, I'm sure. They had the service early in the morning, finished before noon. Some of his relatives even stood outside talking for quite a while afterward." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. They had done it again. They had deliberately deceived me. My hands shook as I dialed my mother's number. She picked up immediately, as if she had been waiting. "Hello, dear. Are you on your way?" Her voice was sickeningly sweet, artificial. I gripped my phone tightly, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. "You told me it was at 2 p.m., I said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. There was a brief pause, then my mother let out a small, amused chuckle, utterly unapologetic. "Oh, did I? You must have misheard." "Don't lie to me," I screamed, my fury igniting like wildfire. "You did this to keep me out, to make everyone think I didn't care enough to say goodbye. Didn't you?" My mother didn't deny it. "Anna, don't make such a big deal out of this." Her voice turned cold. "Everyone saw that you weren't there. Besides, it doesn't matter anymore." Doesn't matter? They had stolen my last chance to say goodbye to the only person who ever truly believed in me, and now? They said it didn't matter? Before I could respond, I heard Julia's voice behind my mother, syrupy sweet, like poisoned candy. "Oh, poor dear sister," she mocked. "Who would have thought you'd be so ungrateful? Skipping your own grandfather's funeral." I gripped my phone tightly. They hadn't just lied to me. They were rewriting the story, turning me into the heartless granddaughter, the one the whole family would look down on. I hung up. There was no reason to keep listening to their lies. There was nothing tying me to them anymore. They had cut me off from the family. I would find out the truth. I couldn't let this end the way they wanted. After hanging up, I sat still in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to keep the rising fury from consuming me. They had deceived me. They had stolen my last chance to say goodbye to my grandfather. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove straight to the one place that could give me answers. My grandparents' house. My grandparents' home hadn't changed much since the last time I was there. Grandma Ellen's rose bushes still bloomed in the late afternoon sun, and the wind gently rattled the chimes hanging on the porch. I climbed the steps, my heart pounding. If she was truly in a nursing home like they claimed, then who was taking care of this house? I knocked on the door. Silence. Then, slow footsteps echoed from inside. The door creaked open. And standing before me was none other than Grandma Ellen. I froze. My eyes locked onto her, searching for any signs of illness or frailty. But she looked just as healthy as the last time I saw her. The wrinkles on her face had deepened slightly, but her eyes were still sharp, still full of clarity. "Anna?" Her voice trembled, as if she couldn't believe I was standing in front of her. Tears welled in my eyes. "Grandma, they told me you were in a nursing home." Her face darkened. She reached out, gently pulling me inside before shutting the door behind us, as if afraid someone might be listening. "We have a lot to talk about, Anna." She led me into the living room, where everything remained just as I remembered. The old science magazines my grandfather used to read were still neatly stacked on the bookshelf. Grandma sat down in her chair, her expression somber, as if carefully choosing her words. "They told me you didn't want to see me anymore," she said quietly. "That you were ashamed of us. That you changed your phone number to cut off contact." I shook my head, anger tightening around my throat. "No, you have to believe me. I never changed my number. I called dozens of times, but no one ever answered." Grandma sighed, her face etched with sorrow. "I know, Anna. I know you would never do that." She reached out, taking my hand and squeezing it gently. "But now, it's time to expose the truth." Grandma Ellen stood up, walked to the bookshelf, opened a hidden drawer, and pulled out a stack of documents. "The will of your grandfather," Grandma said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We need to call the whole family together. We will make them face the consequences of what they've done to you, Anna." 1 week later, at my grandparents' house. I sat still in my chair, my heart pounding, as I heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. My parents arrived first, walking in with the same casual expressions as if this were just another family gathering. My mother glanced around the room, her gaze passing over me like I was nothing more than a shadow. My father stood next to her, arms crossed over his chest. Julia followed right behind them, wearing her usual fake smile. She plopped down in the seat across from me, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to care. Then, Grandpa's lawyer Patrick Reynolds entered, carrying a briefcase. Grandma Ellen cleared her throat, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Today, we will be hearing the reading of Martin Walker's will." The room fell into complete silence. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a set of documents, and began to read. First, Grandpa left this house to Grandma Ellen, along with a large financial sum to ensure she would never have to worry about money. No one reacted. That was expected. But when Mr. Reynolds moved on to the next section, the tension in the room thickened. "All ownership of Walker Science Lab, including all equipment and associated investments, shall be transferred to my granddaughter, Anna Walker." Silence. My mother's eyes widened in shock. My father clenched his fists. "Julia?" Julia went rigid, her face twisting in disbelief. "What?" Julia shot up from her seat, nearly screaming. "No way, that was supposed to be mine." "Sit down, Julia," Grandma said sternly. But Julia didn't listen. She turned to our parents, her voice shrill with desperation. "You told me. You said if I played the role of the good granddaughter, if I pretended to care about them, I would get everything. How did this happen?" My parents stayed silent, their discomfort impossible to hide. The lawyer continued reading. "The remaining assets will be divided equally between Anna Walker and Julia Walker." But Julia no longer cared about the money, she wanted everything. "I won't accept this," she screamed. "Anna doesn't even want that stupid lab. I'm the one who deserves it." I stood up, locking eyes with Julia. "No, Julia," I said, my voice steady, "I am the one who deserves it." Everything was clear now. Grandpa had never forgotten me. And I would not let anyone take away what was rightfully mine. The room was suffocating with tension. My eyes remained fixed on Julia. Her rage boiled over, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her face contorted with fury. I had never seen her this out of control, but deep down, I wasn't surprised. She had always believed she would get everything. "No!" Julia shrieked, her voice cracking with madness. "No way, that lab is mine!" She spun toward our parents, her eyes burning red with anger. "You promised," You said as long as I followed the plan, as long as I played the role of the sweet granddaughter, cried in front of everyone, I would get everything, and now I'm supposed to accept just some tiny portion? No! I won't accept this! Her words sliced through the air like a blade, tearing apart the facade my parents had tried so hard to maintain. My mother took a deep breath, regaining her composure, but her eyes flickered with panic. Julia, enough, she snapped, but her voice lacked the firmness it once held. This is not the time to discuss this. Not the time? Julia let out a bitter laugh. You both told me that if I stuck to the plan, if I pretended to be a loving granddaughter, if I shed a few tears at the right moments, I would get everything? And now I'm supposed to settle for a measly split? No, I won't accept this. I stared at her, silent. Everything was out in the open now. I no longer had any doubts. My parents had never intended to be fair. They hadn't just favored Julia. They had groomed her into the greedy, entitled person she had become. My father, now out of patience, spoke in a gruff, unfriendly tone, no longer pretending to be diplomatic. Anna, you heard Julia. If you truly care about this family, you should understand that you don't need that lab. Julia needs it more than you do. I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. I let out a short, humorless laugh, unable to believe what I was hearing. I don't need it, I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. You mean, I should just hand it over to Julia? That's right, my mother interjected, her voice coated with artificial sweetness. Family is about sacrifice. Julia has always wanted a stable career, and you already have your own accomplishments. Why can't you share with your sister? My blood boiled. Share, I spat. Share, like how you've always taken everything from me to give to Julia? Like how you cut me off from my grandparents, made Grandpa think I abandoned him? Both my parents stiffened. But Julia wasn't finished. She glared at me, pure hatred in her eyes. You don't deserve this, she screamed. You're just a pathetic bookworm. You have no friends, no life. All you do is bury yourself in those stupid experiments. While Enough. Grandma Ellen's voice rang out, strong and commanding, cutting through the chaos in the room. Both Julia and my parents fell silent. She stood up, holding an old letter in her hands, her eyes filled with deep disappointment. Do you know what this is? She asked, her voice slow but filled with authority. This is the last letter Martin left for me. About all of you. My parents paled. She unfolded the letter and began reading, her voice shaking with anger. My dearest Ellen. If you are reading this, then I am no longer here. I am writing this because I want you to know. I never trusted the kindness of our son and daughter-in-law. They have turned Julia into a greedy, selfish person, and they have deliberately stripped Anna of every opportunity. Grandma's eyes darkened and her voice sharpened. I am leaving the laboratory to Anna because she deserves it. Not because she is the favored child, but because she has always worked hard, always fought for herself, while the others have only sought to take advantage and destroy. If they ever try to steal what belongs to Anna, cast them out of her life. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Grandma folded the letter, her gaze piercing through each of them. And now, I will do exactly as Martin wanted. She pointed to the door. All of you, get out of my house, right now. My mother's mouth opened, as if she wanted to protest, but no words came out. My father stood up, fists clenched, but he didn't dare to argue. Julia let out an enraged scream. You can't do this to me. I can, and I will, Grandma snapped. I only regret that Martin left you anything at all. My parents dragged Julia toward the door, even as she thrashed and screamed. When the door slammed shut behind them, a weight lifted from my chest. At last, I had reclaimed what was mine. No one could take my dreams away from me anymore. Grandpa's laboratory had always been a place I only dared to dream of. Situated on a vast stretch of land outside the city, the modern building stood with its transparent glass walls gleaming in the morning sunlight, like a jewel nestled in nature. I stood before the grand glass doors, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the small plaque mounted on them. For Science Lab, where science leads the future. Grandpa's name was still there, but now it belonged to me too. I stepped inside. Everything remained exactly as he had left it. The neatly arranged lab benches, the meticulously stored equipment, the faint scent of chemicals lingering in the air. I took a deep breath. This was the future I deserved, no longer suppressed, no longer forced into the shadows of others. Everything was mine now. The following months were busy, yet profoundly meaningful. I threw myself into my work with an intensity I had never felt before. The renewable energy research projects that Grandpa and I had once discussed were now becoming reality under my hands. The lab staff, those who had once respected Grandpa, quickly welcomed me with surprise and admiration. They no longer saw me as just Martin Walker's unknown granddaughter. They saw me as a scientist in my own right. Someone capable of continuing his legacy. Every day I felt his presence. In the handwritten notes he left behind. In every complex equation I solved, remembering the countless times he had patiently sat beside me, helping me untangle each problem, one step at a time. And every time I look up at the photo of Grandpa and me hanging on my office wall, me as a child, wearing oversized safety goggles, holding a test tube with a beaming smile, while he stood beside me, his eyes filled with pride. I carry that moment with me. A reminder that family isn't about shared blood, but about those who believe in and love us unconditionally. Grandma Ellen never left my side. Despite her age, she still visited the lab often, bringing warm, freshly baked pastries and words of encouragement. I signed up for an online science course, she said one afternoon, while I was analyzing a test sample. I want to understand more about what you're doing. I laughed, looking at her with fondness. You don't have to do that, Grandma. I just need you to be here. She patted my hand gently, her eyes filled with unwavering determination. I want to be a part of your world, Anna, and your grandfather would be so proud. I squeezed her hand, saying nothing. Some moments don't need words, just the presence of those who truly love you is enough. My family tried to contact me afterward. At first there were sweet messages from my mother, pretending as if nothing had happened. Anna, how have you been? Your father and I miss you so much. Maybe we should meet and talk. Then came the pleading. Sweetheart, Julia still hasn't been able to accept this. Do you really need that lab? Please. Think about the family. And when I didn't respond, their words turned sharp and venomous. You ungrateful brat. This family has sacrificed so much for you and you cut us off over a bunch of useless lab equipment? Well, I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. 1 year after Grandpa's passing, Walker Science Lab was officially recognized as a leading research center in clean energy technology. I stood on the stage at the anniversary celebration, looking out into the audience. There in the front row was Grandma Ellen, her eyes glowing with pride. I took a deep breath, holding the microphone, my voice steady and clear. I want to dedicate this achievement to someone special. Someone who believed in me even when the world turned its back. Someone who taught me that knowledge is power, and perseverance is the greatest weapon. My grandfather, Martin Walker. The applause thundered through the hall. I inhaled deeply, my chest swelling with pride. I had lost so much. But in the end, I had gained everything that truly mattered. Freedom, dreams, and a real family. And I knew, even though he was no longer here, Grandpa was smiling. Anna's story is not just a tale of family favoritism and betrayal, it's a powerful journey of reclaiming self-worth. It highlights a sad reality. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have a family that truly loves and supports them. But more importantly, it reminds us that true family is not defined by blood, but by those who believe in and cherish us, unconditionally. Sometimes, to find freedom and success, we have to walk away from toxic relationships and build our own path. How did Anna's story make you feel? Have you ever experienced family favoritism or had something rightfully yours taken away? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life.